Alright, today we're going to do lesson 46, and we are going to write decimal numbers in expanded notation. Pretty easy concept. We're just basically expanding on something that you guys already learned, so this shouldn't be too. Alright, place value is very important to learn if you're going to understand math. Now, place value is determined by the numbers placed in relation to the decimal point. So your starting point, your springboard, so to speak, is your decimal point. So if the number is directly to the left of the decimal point, it is in the ones place. And if the number is directly to the right of the decimal point, it is in the tenths place. I emphasize the THS. So tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So if you need to pause the video and memorize these really fast, feel free to do so. But you need to know these. Alright, what we have right here is a 4 and a 6. So if we were to write that out with words, you would say 4 and 6. Now this means nothing unless I add another word right here that describes the location of the 6. Where is the 6? 4 and 6, that could be anything. Okay? But the 6, if you memorize your place value, is 2 places over from the decimal point. So the 6 is going to be in the hundredths spot. So you have to write the word hundredths. You have to write the word hundredths in order to describe where the 6 is located. Okay, so now that you know how to write this as a word, we're going to write this in expanded notation. Expanded notation basically gives you 2 pieces of information to describe this number 6. The first piece of information that we're going to write down, actually, let's do 4 first. Let's describe the 4. So there's 2 pieces of information that will describe the 4. One piece of information is the 4 itself. Then I'm going to multiply that by the place value of the 4. And the 4 is in the ones place. So I'm going to multiply that by 1. Okay? Then I'm going to add another term to that. This is your first term. And I'm going to put 6. You don't write out the word 6. You put the number 6. Alright? That's the first piece of information that describes this number. 6. And then I'm going to multiply it by its place value. And we already said up here when we wrote out the word that the place value is hundredths. So you're going to multiply this by 0.01. The 0.01 describes the place value of the 6. Alright, so this is expanded notation of 4 and 6 hundredths. You have to, it's called expanded notation for a reason because it's been expanded. Let's do another problem. Alright, here's another number. 3 and 709 thousandths THS. Alright, so let's expand this out. So we're going to take the 3 and we're going to multiply it by its place value. And since it's directly to the left of the decimal point, that's the ones place. So we're going to multiply it by 1 since 1 is the place value of 3. We're going to add that term to another term. Alright, so I'm going to take, what are 2 numbers that describe this number? Well, 1, of course, is 7. And I'm going to multiply that by the place value of the 7. In this case, it's going to be 0.1, or 1/10. Okay? 1/10 represents the place value of the 7. I'm going to add that to 1 more, and that's going to be 9. And what's the place value of the 9? It's going to be 0.001. So that's 1/1000th. So this is the expanded notation form of 3 and 709 thousandths. All this stuff is your answer. Alright, another way to write the expanded notation is you could change these decimals to fractions. So let's rewrite this using fractions. Alright, the first one would stay the same. 3 times 1. That's the first term no matter what. Alright, now we're going to take this term, 7 times 1/10, and instead of writing 1/10 as a decimal, we're going to take 1/10 and write it as a fraction. So that would be 1/10. So you got to know how to convert decimals to fractions, which we've been over. Alright, so now we're going to take 9, and what are we going to multiply the 9 by? since this says right here 1,000th, since we're multiplying it by 1,000th, then I'm going to change this to a decimal or a fraction as well. Okay? So this would be how you would write expanded notation using fractions instead of decimals. Alright, now we are going to go backwards. We have a number in expanded notation, and we're going to go from expanded notation back to standard notation, which is just a regular decimal number. Okay, so we have 4 times 1/10. So we have 2 pieces of information that we're going to use to write a number. Let's start out by putting some blanks. Sometimes writing in blanks will help you when you're doing math. Alright, so what goes in the ones place? Well, there's nothing that's multiplied by 1. This is 1/10. This is 1,000th. So there's nothing that we're multiplying by 1. So 0 goes right there. Now, is there anything in the tenths place? Remember, this is a tenth place. Look up here for a tenth. Well, right here is 1/10. So this is the number that we're going to use. Where are we going to put it? We're going to put it in the tenths place. So 4 goes in the tenths place. There is no term up here that describes the hundredths place. So since there's no term up here that would describe the hundredths place, we're going to put a 0. Now 5 is the number we're going to use, and where are we going to put 5? Well, that would go in the thousandths place. So 5 would go right there. So right here we have 405 thousandths. If you were to write that as a fraction, it would be 405 1,000ths. Alright, moving on. Alright, the second part of this lesson wants us to practice multiplying numbers by 10 and 100. Now, the number system that we use is a base 10 number system, which makes it easy when you which makes multiplying things by 10 and 100 rather easy. It's back to decimal placement, and so you got to understand decimal placement when you're multiplying things by 10 and 100. All right, so if you have, let's say, 24 hundredths, meaning the 24 comes to the right of the decimal, and I want to multiply this by, let's say, 10. Because remember, we're multiplying things by 10 and 100. Now, if I multiply this by 9 or 8 or 7, if this number was a 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, any of those numbers, it's a lot more difficult. But if you multiply something by 10, it is very easy to come up with the answer. All you do is relocate the decimal point. If you multiply something by 10, you're going to take the decimal point and you're going to move the decimal one place to the right. Okay? So this would now be 2. Instead of the decimal being before the 2, it's going to be one place to the right of the 2. It's going to be 2 and 4 tenths. Alright? So let's try, this will be part A of this problem. Part B, let's try 0.7 or 75 hundredths. Okay? If I multiply that by 10, where would the decimal point be? Well, if you multiply anything by 10, you move the decimal one place to the right. So now the decimal point is going to be one in between the 7 and the 5. So this would be 7 and 5 tenths. Moving on to C. Let's do 0.051 times 10. Now this number looks a little bit different. There's nothing in the tenths place. So some people might think, oh, the answer is 5 and 1/10. The decimal goes in between the two numbers. No, that is not the formula for how you multiply by 10. When you multiply by 10, you move the decimal one place to the right. So one place to the right, the decimal point would be in between, will be before the 5. So in that case, if the decimal is before the 5, the answer would be 51 hundredths. 51 hundredths. Okay? So these are a couple ways you can multiply numbers by 10. Now, I'm going to change it up a little bit. What if we're multiplying something by 100? Okay? So let's change, instead of multiplying by 10, we're going to multiply this by 100. and this by 100, and this by 100. Well, some of you might be guessing already, well, if it was by 10, you move the decimal point one place to the right. Well, if you multiply it by 100, you're going to be moving it 2 places to the right. So instead of the decimal point being in between the 2 and 4, it's going to be after the 4. So the decimal point would be after the 4, which instead of being 24 hundredths, it'll be 24 with a decimal point. All right? Say this was money. Instead of being 75 cents, if you multiply 75 cents by 100, you are going to have the decimal move 2 places to the right. You're now going to have $75. Okay? So if you had 75 cents, if 100 people had 75 cents, how much money would those 100 people have? All together, they would have $75. All right, same thing with this. If you have 0.051 or 51 thousandths, and you multiply that by 100, you move the decimal 2 places to the right. Now the decimal point, instead of being in front of the 5, it's going to be in between the 5 and the 1. So that'll be 5 1/10. All right, so hopefully this makes sense. Let's do a couple problems on your homework, and we will call it. All right, number 1 from your homework. When a fraction with a numerator of 30 and a denominator of 8 is converted to a mixed number and reduced, what is the result? So a lot of people get intimidated when we do word problems because it's like, I have to read and work with numbers at the same time. That's scary. Not so scary. You got to just think about what it's saying. All right, so this is a fraction, meaning you'll need a fraction bar. So start with that. Then we have 2 numbers, 30 and 8. Where do those numbers go? Well, it tells you. The numerator, which is the number on top, is 30. So 30 goes on top. And the denominator is 8. Denominator starts with a D. Think denominator down, because down also starts with a D. So it's 30 over 8. And then we know any improper fraction, if we want to change it to a mixed number, is top divided by bottom, which would be 30 divided by 8. All right, so how many times will 8 go into 30? At least 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Subtract, you're going to have a remainder of 6. All right, so now since this is not a decimal, we can put a decimal point. Remember, you move the decimal point straight. Actually, we're not going to do decimal. We're going to make this a fraction. So 6 goes on top because it's the remainder, and your divisor is 8. So it would be 3 and 6/8. Now, if you divide top and bottom of this fraction by 2, then you can reduce it. So this is going to be 3. Don't forget to bring the 3 over. And then 6 divided by 2 is going to be 3, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So your answer is 3 3/4. Alright, and I got hot, so I took off my sweatshirt. Bases! 4 and 20 is how many dozen? This is number 3 on your homework. Alright, so 4 and 20, that would be 4 plus 20 equals 24. And how many dozens are 24? Well, a dozen, you know, is 12. A dozen eggs is 12 eggs. So you're going to take 12, or 24, divided by 12 to figure out how many dozens are in 24. 24 divided by 12 is 2. So your answer is 2 dozen. Don't forget the label. Alright, here's what you should have down for number 10. I didn't talk through it because it's kind of an easy problem, but I just wanted to show you my work. So pause the video if you want to copy it down, or check your work against my work to see if number 10 is correct. Alright, and I did the same thing for number 11. Algebra. This is how you should show your work for algebra every single time. Alright, let's go ahead and do number 14. It wants to find the area of the shaded region of this rectangle. Your first step for this is to find the area of the entire region. So in order to do that, you do length times width. So I'm going to take 2.5 centimeters times 4 centimeters. Alright? So once I multiply those out, you're going to think 4 times 5 is 20, carry your 2. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is 10. Now, since the decimal is one place over on top of the fraction, or on top of this problem, okay, that means you move the decimal one place over there. So that the answer is going to be 10. Now, we know that half, or 50%, because 1/2 equals 50%, of this this rectangle is shaded. Notice this is a triangle. So you're going to take 10, and you're going to multiply that by 50%. Okay. Now, if I want to multiply something by a percent, you got to change it to a decimal. In order to do that, you erase the percent sign, and you jump the point 2 places over. 1, 2. All right. Now we're going to multiply this out. So 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 1 is 5. Okay. Now, since the decimal point has been moved 2 places over on top of the problem, then we're going to move it 2 places over on the bottom of the problem. So your answer is going to be, the area of this shaded region is going to be 5 centimeters squared. Don't forget your label.